Welcome to the Book Hook Podcast, where I've got cool insider book info, author and industry expert interviews, book reviews, and much more. Today, I'm chatting with author and poet Hollay Ghadery about rejecting reader sanctity, writing as two halves of a whole, and, well, fantasizing about being a widow. You know what? I'll let Hollay introduce herself.
I'm a mom of four, and I'm a sometimes wife.
Sometimes wife. I like that. I feel like I want to circle back to that. Well, thank you so much for being here, Hollay. This is such an honor. I know we met officially in person. We met in, it was April in Hamilton, Ontario at Great Lit Festival. And you were just such a ray of sunshine, a wonderful person. So I'm so excited to have you here today. And I just finished reading, I read all your work, the three. You've got a memoir, you've got a collection of flash fiction, and you've got a collection of poetry. And I know you have more coming out. But because I am personally a memoirist, as well as I write a lot about mental health, Fuse really spoke to me. So I'm wondering if we can start there.
Absolutely.
Yes. So on page 30 in Fuse, you wrote, I'm someone who's not wholly one thing or the other, but who's a whole person. What does that mean?
When you're mixed race, biracial, even biracial, there's a half implied there. People are always like, well, you're half Iranian, Hollay, you're half white, and everyone is trying to break me down into components they can understand. And always having to position and justify myself over the course of my life has really taken a toll on me and a toll of my understanding of who I am and where I belong. And, belonging is such a fundamental human need. We need to feel like we belong. And my whole life have never felt like I belong anywhere. Even now, I don't really know if I have a place I'd say, well, I belong here, aside from in the family I've created. And even then, sometimes, I live with teenagers, even then they have a way of making me feel like I'm an alien sometimes. But, so I maybe sometimes feel a little bit of an outcast in my own family too. But in all seriousness, just in society itself and within my two cultures, I certainly haven't ever felt like I was enough of one or the other. But I'm wholly a person. And the thing about Fuse is it's kind of a time capsule of who I was at the time I wrote it, which was brand spanking new sober, grappling with issues I had never really tried to address before. And while I do not fundamentally disagree with anything I said in Fuse, and I stand behind what I said at the time, I think that my thoughts on certain things have not even evolved, just changed, because I've changed and I've learned more, and I've been part of a greater discourse around mixed race personhood and identity now. And I think I'd write a slightly different book now, but I'm really proud of what Fuse is, and I'm glad it is what it is because it reflects the river I stepped into when I wrote it.
So, and you wrote it, you said it is your pandemic baby. So I'm wondering how much of, Hollay during the pandemic and also with small children has changed, and how much, what would you actually change if you were to rewrite Fuse, or perhaps you were to go into a different memoir, a more evolved memoir? What would change?
Well, I mean, it was published during the pandemic, in the spring of the pandemic. It was written pre-pandemic.
Right.
So in the book, there's no pandemic thoughts at all, because that wasn't I wasn't living through that at the time. It was accepted about a year before the pandemic, and I didn't make any changes to add any thoughts to that. This pandemic was very difficult for so many people. But because I live with existential OCD and I live in a constant state of fear, I was like, yeah, it changed very little for me, because that's how I live. That kind of uncertainty and fear is how I live my entire life. So I really didn't feel like anything I was being asked to do from my place of extreme privilege of having a home in the country, a work at home job. I worked from home before. My husband's job was an essential service, so we had job stability there. I didn't feel like I was pushed out of my realm too much. So there was that. And the things that I changed, well, I mean, I wouldn't be as vulnerable. I don't think I talk about half the things I talk about. I look back now and I'm like, I can't believe I wrote about that. That's a lot. I shared a lot. And now I don't think that I feel this need to connect with people about these very vulnerable things. And I would feel like I owed less to people, but I think the
Yeah.
reason I feel like I owe less to people and I don't feel as much urgency is because I wrote what I wrote, right? So I don't, it's very difficult for me to say I wouldn't be as vulnerable when the reason I wouldn't be as vulnerable is because I have been that vulnerable.
Right.
So I'm not really sure if I'm the best judge of that, but I'm proud of how I dealt with my family. I'm proud of how I dealt with talking about my children, and I'm even good with how I dealt with me writing about myself, even though some people
Mm.
have said that I'm very hard on myself. I'm like, no, I think I was exactly the right level.
The honesty in it was quite surprising. There were some sections in there I thought, "Oh my goodness, this is." I don't wanna use the word brave because anytime somebody says that to me, I just, "Oh, seriously?" I don't want anyone to call me brave. It's just, what choice do you have? And I felt like when I was reading it, there were no other choices. Everything that happened, all the actions that were taken that you took in your life kind of makes sense for what happened.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what it was like to go back to some of those moments in your life, particularly with your father, what that's been like to reconcile with, if there's any reconciliation within yourself of having written that kind of honesty.
Well, I think it helps me to remember writing about it, like why I am the way I
Mhm.
am about certain things, why I have such aversion to anyone, but particularly men trying to tell me what to do. Like, I do not react
Yeah.
well to it at all. But I mean, there's not reacting well to it, and then there's not reacting well to it for no reason. I can remember recently, like, we live in a really old house and we need to replace our front doors, mostly because of the dogs, not because of the age of the house. But I said to my husband, "Oh, I'm just going to replace the door." He said, "No, you're not. I've got it." And I was like, "You're gonna come home and the door is going to be replaced, buddy. You don't get to tell me what to do." And he immediately backed off and was like, "Okay, I worded that wrong. What I meant is you don't have to buy a new door. I can fix it."
Mhm.
Like, he builds houses for a living.
Right.
He's just saying, you don't need to buy a whole new door. This is completely fixable. That was all he was trying to say, but the way it came out
Mhm.
was like, and you're going to come home to a whole crew
Yeah.
and a whole new front of the house if you don't watch your mouth. Because I mean, I act out of knee jerk reaction to feeling like someone's putting pressure on me
Mhm.
in those situations. It's like, no, I'm not going to have any guy,
Mhm.
man, anyone tell me what to do
Yeah, which
ever
makes sense,
again.
and you can see that where that comes from in the memoir. I'm wondering, you see that now about yourself. I'm wondering how much of writing has actually impacted your sense of self and how you see yourself and how you see your interactions and your place in the world, and particularly somebody living with mental illness, a woman, and also being raised in a house that there was a lot of toxic masculinity and biracial. There are a lot of intersections here. I'm wondering if writing has helped to illuminate anything for you.
The writing itself, no. The therapy before, yes. The publishing and having people read it and interacting with readers,
Yeah.
yes. The writing itself was just me sitting down thinking, okay, I want to create something that as closely as possible resembles art
Mhm.
out of this experience as I can. So it was not really an illuminating experience that way. There was illuminating experiences before. There was illuminating experiences while I was journaling for my
Mhm.
therapy, but like I didn't share that writing because that writing was terrible.
Yeah.
Like journaling and diary writing is awful
Yeah.
stuff. So that's not what got put into the book. And then the writing of it was just, okay, I'm going to try to get these out. How do I want to shape this? Like I was thinking very consciously about taking my experience and making something that I'd show to other
Yeah.
people. And so I was writing for the purpose of publication. I wasn't writing for myself. I mean, I was writing for myself, but I was writing for other people
Mhm.
too, specifically other, especially women
Yeah.
who might have same experiences as me. I definitely had an audience in mind. And then when it was published, I definitely had wonderful life changing experiences talking to other people, not necessarily even biracial people. I had one woman who's Italian and grew up, parents from Italy. She was first generation born in Canada, and she had a lot of the same cultural issues that I grew up with, conservative at home, and but when you go out in the world you're expected to be someone
Yeah.
else. So that was a really interesting experience as well, and a really just comforting one as well, to have that. But the writing itself was in no way, shape, or form comforting. That was just, or illuminating. That was mostly just a lot of work and thinking. I mean, I love creating art. I love whether I'm painting very badly or I'm in a community theater show and acting very badly or writing semi decently. I love it. I think that it's I'm not necessarily doing it to like feel better or find out something new. I've usually done that before, and now I'm trying to express whatever shiny new thing
So
I
you're
have.
moving from the discovery process, which is, within your own therapeutic writing, your diary, probably even at this point, I imagine you've got a notebook where you jot down some poems, some ideas, things like that, and then moving to creating something that's kind of got a little bit more of a shape to it, but also with the intention of publication. Is there any kind of a reaction within yourself moving from something that's quite so personal into something that then becomes a product to be sold?
I would love it if I just lived in a world where people now it's just I could sustain myself somehow without having to sell any of this. But yeah, I don't. So I know I really don't because I think it's so necessary. I mean it sounds arrogant to sit here and say, oh, my writing is so necessary. But I mean I think these perspectives that you don't hear about a lot, I think being honest and being vulnerable and I mean, I don't even consider it being vulnerable. I think it's only vulnerable because everybody else is so shut off. I don't consider myself that I'm being that vulnerable. I mean, there was a lot that didn't make it into the book because I
Wow.
didn't want to talk about it. There was a ton of stuff that I just did not write about
Okay.
or that got cut at the last minute because I was like, whoa, that's too far. And I mean, if you've read the book, so if I said something was too far, like imagine,
Yeah.
but it's stuff that I'm not ready to talk about and I may never be ready to talk about. And that's okay. I don't think that we owe anybody anything. I think we owe them our truth,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that you have to give away every inch of yourself. If you can get your story out and give it legs without needing to, give up every pound of flesh you have,
Mhm.
like that's okay. I could get points across without like illustrating it with every single stupid thing I've ever done or horrific experience I've ever had. Like I'll share some of them, but I don't owe anybody all of them. But I also don't believe that I need I don't believe in other people's sanctity.
What do you mean by
Um,
that?
so what I mean is I believe in the right to privacy. I believe that nobody has to tell me anything about themselves or share anything they don't want to share about themselves. But I don't believe that I have to sanitize myself
Mm.
for anybody else.
Mhm.
I don't believe in keeping people's I don't believe in their sanctity for me and my experience.
Okay.
If somebody doesn't want to read my book, don't read my book.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't want to come to a talk I'm doing about a certain topic, don't come. But I'm not going to sanitize or censor myself because I might make somebody uncomfortable and I might offend their precious sense of sanctity. I don't believe in their sanctity.
I'm really fascinated by this with a memoir, or even if you're writing, say, auto fiction or fiction that tends to lean on your own personal experiences, between how much trauma you should hand over to the reader, you should expose your reader to, versus how much you withhold simply because it might be too much for the reader. I'm wondering where you lie in that kind of a. I know there's a bit of a debate. There was an article actually that came out in the New Yorker, the New York Times, one of them, and it was about trauma porn. And I'm fascinated by this because also move this, the trauma porn or the argument against it into the memoir sphere, which I thought is interesting. So I'm wondering where your thoughts lie on how much of that trauma you can hand over to your reader versus how much should you not protect them, I guess.
Again, I'm not really interested in protecting the reader.
Yeah,
They can stop reading my book
yeah,
any point
yeah.
that they want to. I don't really feel too much obligation that way. What I do feel obligation to is telling or creating a good piece of art, telling a
Mhm.
good story. And I don't believe trauma porn is a good story.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I think that it's sensationalist
Mhm.
and I think most of our lives are comprised of more of that. And when you paint your life just to be just this one
Mhm.
thing, and again, there are exceptions to this. There are people who've had truly terrible
Mhm.
lives and not many moments of lightness. And them just telling their lives could seem a lot like trauma porn, but it really is just
Reality.
that terrible. So yeah, like there are exceptions to everything I'm saying here,
Mhm.
but I think for a lot of memoirists, that, if when you buy into that, or you think, well, I have to give all of this away, I have to really turn this volume up to 10 and share everything because that's what's expected and that's what sells. I mean, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, and I think you're doing the art a disservice, because I think that that takes a huge toll on you, feeling like you have to tell everything in a certain way and give everything away. But I also think that I don't think it really makes for great art. I think it's exhausting. And I think that the best memoirs, even the ones that are the heaviest that I've read, they have this kind of oxygen in them as well, where you can pause and just take these deep breaths. And there's this comforting, and there's like these pockets of comfort and safe space in them. And I don't think trauma porn allows for that. I feel like you're just being waterboarded. And like I've read, it's like, like it's this, like, I don't, it's not, I find it offensive as an art form.
Yeah.
But as a reader, when I've read those, I'm just like, okay, well, we're not going to keep reading this. Like, the book is not for me. And forget about memoirs. I mean, I remember I made it 14 pages into a novel once where it was just so much horribleness in the beginning. I was like, we're done. And that's the great thing about being a reader, is I can just shut the book.
Yeah.
I don't think the author owed me a different story. I'm just not the reader for this particular book. And I don't think that book, as an art form, succeeded, because I think it had a really interesting story to tell. But I was never going to figure it out because it was too much for me.
It's too
Maybe
much
for other
trauma,
people, not.
and the
Yeah.
trauma was not lending to the narrative.
So that's the balance, is the trauma has to be there for a purpose. It's not, again, it's not your diary.
Yeah.
It's not your journal. Like, what you're creating is not that. And I think there are still exceptions to what I'm saying. Everything is so nuanced and complex, and it moves. These stories move. Narrators moves. They're fluid. They have life. Even the past is constantly changing. So I don't want to say, oh, I'm on this side or this side, but I can say that I'm fine with sharing as much trauma as the story that you're creating
Requires.
needs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not really worried about reader responses. Shut the book.
Yeah.
Like, stop reading.
Yeah.
It's okay.
There's a freedom in that too, as a writer, an author saying, if you don't want to read it, don't read it.
Yeah, I think other people find my book far more disturbing than I do. or parts of it far, because like, I don't. It's my life. It's like, if you rub sandpaper on your skin enough, you just stop feeling anything.
Yeah.
Like, there's this numbness that I have to all of it. So I don't have this reluctance to talk about it, or, I still read sometimes reviews that pop up here and there of the book, and people are really, oh, this is so vulnerable. Like, this is, and I get it. I guess if I'd read the book and it wasn't me, I might feel that way too. But because it's me, I'm just like, yeah, okay. Like, I'm used to it. Doesn't bother me in any way, shape, or form.
You have that distance and objectivity that you're able to create the story, but you're able to bring your reader into this emotional story, this emotional characters really that you are writing, while still remaining that objectivity as the author, as the one with authority over the work. And that comes through in this work. Speaking of authority, you are quite the flash fiction writer.
Thank you.
And there are a lot of commonalities and themes, the objectification of women, misogyny, that I notice, between Fuse and then moving into widow fantasies. I'm wondering where widow fantasies started for you.
Well, it did start after about 7 years of marriage, and I was fantasizing about my husband just not being here anymore. Like, wouldn't that just be amazing? He has a really good life insurance policy at work. He lives in a high risk, like, he works in a high risk profession. People have died on his job before. So I was like, maybe I'll get lucky, right? And that sounds so insensitive. I'm still married to this person. And especially after somebody has read Fuse and seen what a like stand-up guy he is. Like, I seem like a bit of a monster. But the truth is, he's not perfect. Like, some people call him Saint Matthew, which drives me crazy. He loves it, but it drives me bananas. But after 7 years of marriage, we're in this heteronormative relationship where all the domestic labor, all the second shift stuff is coming to me. So not only do we have 4 kids, actually at 7 years, I'm not sure we'd had 4 kids, but we had a few kids. I was having to take care of doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, take care of the house, take care of meals, take care of school, take care of play dates, schedule his doctor's appointments, do his taxes. Like, I was just, plus having my own job, my own writing career, and I was just suffocating. It was awful. And I started having these fantasies because I thought, well, wouldn't it just be wonderful if he wasn't here anymore?
Mhm.
And I'd never have that feeling towards my children because they're my babies.
Mhm.
They're my heart. I would do anything for them. I'd give up anything for them. Like it wasn't the same reaction. But with him, I felt like I was being crushed again, that I was being controlled again, but this way in a much more insidious and casual
Mhm.
way than necessarily living with, under my parents'
Your
roof,
father,
living with
yeah.
my father specifically. Yeah.
Mhm.
I really just felt like I was getting these little shots of freedom, every time that I had these fantasies. And they were just little short fantasies whenever I could drift into a reverie, like between parenting and breastfeeding and play dates and play group and library readathons or whatever I was doing with my kids, and work, of course, my job at the time. And yeah, so I went to my therapist because I was starting to worry a bit,
Mhm.
because I love this person. So why am I thinking that? It turns out that it's a very common thing, a very common occurrence for women, especially women in heteronormative relationships, to fantasize about. It can actually have a more violent form of fantasy, especially women who are married to abusers or in narcissistic relationships. That was certainly not the case with me. Some women will actually fantasize about killing their husbands. Now, I didn't do that. I just thought there'd be like an accident at work, whatever. So I spoke to my
Yeah.
therapist. She told me how normal it was, said there was actually a name for this called widow fantasies. And then it was like the sky cracked open. And I
Mhm.
thought, you mean other women have this? And I started talking to other women. And then I stopped talking to just any woman that would listen to me because people were getting creeped out. And
Mhm.
while I don't believe in their sanctity, I was asking them to share personal stories. So that is their privacy. And
Mhm.
some people are not comfortable talking about this kind of thing. Even if they've thought these things, they're not me and they're not going to articulate them. So I stopped kind of with my casual polling everywhere I went,
Yeah.
like kids swim practice. Like I stopped, I stopped that, and I spoke with some wonderful close women, friends of mine, who gave up the goods very nicely.
Oh,
And
love it.
you should always start with your inner
Yeah.
circle, anyways. And so I got wonderful stories, even just women saying, "Yes, I've thought about this." Yes, like I did, like for a period of my life, it was really bad, and I had these fantasies. Yes, I actually ended up divorcing the guy.
Yeah.
Like there were lots of range of different, or my partner, my husband finally died, and that was good at least. Like, but like having that and also loving the person,
Yeah.
but just feeling so put upon by everything that you're expected of, like it's expected of you, not just the things you have to do, but who you have to be, who's not you. And for me, it was particularly oppressive because, like, my husband knew this, but I'm not straight, but I chose to marry this person who happens to be a cis
Yeah.
male, and so I've entered into this kind of heteronormative situation when it in no way, shape, or form reflects who I am. It certainly doesn't reflect my values, but I entered into it. And I also went along with it for a long time because I was an addict for so long. Again, like if you read Fuse, he put up with a lot from me. And I felt like I owed him something. And so I should do this. I should take on all this responsibility. Even when I was an addict still, I felt like I had to do everything I was doing because I owed it to him. And so after my therapist appointment, a few of them, I spoke to my husband, and I mean, he was only upset that I hadn't told him before.
Mm.
He wasn't at all upset that I'd been having the fantasies. He was just upset that I let it get to the point that I was having these fantasies
Yeah.
constantly. So we talked about it, and we worked everything out. And he, I think, does more of the housework and all this stuff than I do
Yeah.
now. And it's not that I don't do anything, but I do very little,
Mhm.
comparatively. Nothing's a 50-50 split at
Yeah.
all times. Everybody gives, what I mean? But like, he's, if something has to be done with the kids, it's not like, well, I have to take time off work. It's like, you can too.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be me who does it. So instead of me having to say that to him now, he just gets it. So that's where this started, was very much so in my life. There are some stories in this book that are basically could be autobiographical. And then there are other stories that have absolutely nothing to do with me, that are like I read a headline in a newspaper about something, or somebody said 3 words to me and it turned into this story, like
Inspiration anywhere.
it's something. Yeah, exactly. Like, so, but when you write a memoir first, everybody assumes that
Yeah.
everything you write is autobiographical, which
And
is
people
not the
tend to
case.
assume that about women as well, that, if they're writing
Yeah.
fiction, obviously, they're taking things from their own life, they're pulling from their own experience. When, and you know what, we can think outside that every now and then, I'm just saying. But I'm
Yeah.
wondering if
Yeah.
I have two questions, and I'm thinking they're probably within the same realm here. Is that the widow part of the widow fantasies? It's also the death of, or and mourning the loss of who these women could have been, who they are, the whole aspect of themselves. Like, you were saying about your sexuality, and that there is a loss there being in a heteronormative relationship when you are in fact queer. And there's an assumption,
Mhm.
there's this implicit assumption that the world makes when they see, a female presenting person, assuming she is a woman with what
Mhm.
seems like a cis man. They assume that that's straight.
Yeah.
So there must be a loss there too, and that might be part of the fantasy, I wonder.
Oh,
Is that
absolutely. There's the story TikTok Virgin in the thing
Mhm.
where this woman's, scrolling through TikTok and is like not as straight as she thinks she is. Like
Are you writing about me?
I think I'm writing about a lot of
All of
women.
us.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're just like, because representation matters so much. So, as a kid, I thought, well, I couldn't possibly be attracted for many reasons. I couldn't possibly be attracted to other women. Number one, I've been taught to hate myself so much
Mm,
that it would never occur to me to like a body like mine because I had such internalized
mm,
misogyny. And women were awful and I was a woman and I was awful. So that was one part of it. But another part of it was that just even in media, whenever you see, representations of same-sex
mhm.
couples or, let's say a lesbian, it's this one type of
Yeah,
person usually. And if that's not your type, or there's two types of people, there's stereotypes. And if that's not your type, if your type is somewhere outside that, you're like, well, then maybe I'm not attracted to that.
yeah.
That's not me. But then you go on TikTok and you see these really fucking hot women
Don't even get me
or
started.
hot non-binary people, whatever, and you're like, I am not
Not straight.
straight. Like there is no way that what I am feeling right now means I'm straight because I would leave my partner. I would be gone in a second, So it's not like just a fantasy, it's this awakening. And I think that so many women have been, because this representation never existed before, and we were thinking, well, if you don't like this and you don't like this, then that's all there is. And then it's like, no, there's
Yeah.
so much. There's so much. And I mean, I knew I wasn't straight long before TikTok, but I mean, if I needed a nail in that coffin,
Yeah.
I think TikTok
I
would have
think a
been it.
lot of elder millennial, young Gen X women are, doing the whole scrolling of TikTok, and they are having a lot of light bulb moments. A lot of,
Yeah, like,
mirrors. Yeah. I'm wondering if
yeah.
the writing in itself, and particularly widow fantasies, then is a form of fantasy for you.
Oh, absolutely. The Widow Fantasies was so much fun to write. I think I wrote it in about 6 months.
Wow.
And yeah, I could not stop.
Wow.
Like I was just, it seemed like the stories, like I felt like I was like a neutron star and everything was just
Oh,
like I could not stop writing these stories. Sometimes I wrote a story a day. Obviously, like they needed a ton of work, and I had wonderful beta readers. Shout out to Nancy Jo Cullen and Lucy Black, who were incredible in those. They were the two I sent like every story to, sometimes as a first draft, so they saw some pretty gnarly stuff, and get their feedback and moved on. But the book actually came together quite quickly because even though I'd been through the therapy and my husband and I were fine, I suddenly felt like this gelling. And I think it was also that like my youngest kid went to school. So I was finally like home with one buddy.
freedom.
Um, but like he was sometimes half days and he was little, so I still had him. And some of these stories had their origins, like first drafts or things like when all of my kids were still home.
Yeah.
Because so when I say I wrote it all in 6 months, some of them existed before. So I don't want to give a false impression. So the form of it reflects the content. I had to write flash fiction because school is a really short period of time. And when you have 4 kids who are in the public school system, and the constantly homesick, like I was still never getting full days to myself to do anything. So I was writing them in these little bursts.
So being in you're in the creative world, multiple aspects of publishing, particularly in CanLit. You're an author, you're a publicist. How has being on all these ends of publishing helped to shape your writing and who you are as an author?
I don't think it's really shaped anything I do too much writing wise. Like I still just
Mhm.
follow whatever I'm wildly passionate about,
Yeah.
and that's it. And I don't like. I can understand now what's. I mean, I think we all know what sells and what doesn't sell. If you read books, you know if you want to sell a lot of books, there's a certain type of book you write. For instance, you don't write flash fiction, don't write
Mhm.
poetry, don't write all this
Mhm.
weird stuff that I'm writing. Don't write a book that is narrated entirely by a sock puppet if you want one of the big five to take it. I've learned this. That's fine.
Mm.
I am I am fine. I love small presses. I love what they publish. I am
Mhm.
honored to be among their authors. I have my expectations met every single time and no problem with them. But I think what it has done is it has made me a more passionate advocate of a more conscious attitude towards readership and
Mhm.
support in the community. Big Five press books, all power to them. I have read many that I enjoy a lot,
Mhm.
even many I love. But small press books are publishing a lot of the best literature in the world, and they're publishing voices and forms that the more
Mhm.
commercial presses not only won't take on, but actually can't. They have entire boards that govern what they can pick up and they can't. Like they're not as agile as smaller
Mhm.
presses where, a great publisher can just say, yep, I'm going to take this. And they don't have to run it by
Yeah.
anyone. They can just make that command decision. They have a lot more agility than the big presses. So I just have a lot of love for that attitude. And
Mhm.
I think also just because like I don't like being controlled. I love the freedom of small presses. So I've become a much more passionate advocate about creating awareness about small presses and about how if you want to support Canadian books, let's say, and I'm not really trying to hop on this nationalistic bandwagon because I think we should always have been supporting books that
Mhm.
were, I think it's the local multiplier effect. Like when you buy locally, things come back for you. Like it's good for
Yeah.
you to keep your money in Canada. Let's just put this rah flag waving nationalism aside. Let's just talk about what's good
Mhm.
for us as a society. To small presses, small presses do that. Most
Mhm.
parts or all parts of the edit publishing process are in Canada. So I think I want to create a consciousness around that, how it's good for us financially. I wanted to talk about how the talent coming out of these presses is just insane. It's so
Mhm.
good. And how these presses are winning major international awards for their books. And
Mhm.
I think that just because you see something in front of you all the time, just because somebody can pay to put a certain book in front of you all the time, doesn't actually make it a good book. It might be,
Mhm.
it might be a good
Mhm.
book. I'm not saying it's not. I want to nurture a kind of curiosity in readers that, we don't always just have to swipe to the closest thing. Like maybe go out and explore what else is out there. Pick up books that really feed you, feed your soul,
Yeah.
not ones that are just the first ones you see all the time. Of course, some of those books can be wonderful. I'm not saying not to take the easy way sometimes. The easy way is wonderful sometimes. But I think that as a society, as a culture, we're losing our ability to be enchanted with the world and to
Mhm.
surprise ourselves and surprise others and find things that truly just delight and surprise us. And I'm trying to encourage and embolden that sense of curiosity among people through small press books, mainly small press books. I mean, we do work with some big presses sometimes too. Um,
Yeah.
but we vet every single book we represent. So one of us has said, "I want this book." If you see that we're representing it, it means that one of us has
Mhm.
actually read it and loves it. That's why it's there.
And therefore you are able to promote it, you're able to sell it
Yeah.
because you love it so much and you believe in it. I love
Exactly.
that.
Every single book,
Yeah.
we've had our little noses in before we say, okay.
It really is a work of passion on all aspects. It takes a village to raise a book, and every single person has to have some passion for it.
Mhm.
One last question for you, and then I promise I will let you go. I could talk to you all day.
Same.
I'm wondering for our non-Canadian listeners and viewers, CanLit is Canadian literary community or Canadian literature. I'm wondering where you see the CanLit community and CanLit sort of a publishing entity, where you see it going.
Well, again, being on the publicity side of things, I probably don't have the most insightful response to that. And I know a lot of people have serious and legitimate issues even with the term canlit, because
Mm-hmm.
if we take it in its stodgiest form, it leaves a lot of people out. The canlit canon is a bunch of older white people for the most part. When I say canlit, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm repurposing the word. So I have no problem using it because, like, even this is not like a branding thing for me. River Street says, like, something like creative celebrating amazing canlit, join the party pals. Like, it's just like, everybody, get your asses in here. Like, that's what I'm talking. If
Yeah.
you love it and it's written by a Canadian, that's canlit. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
I don't have this canonical view of it. CanLit and includes anyone who writes Canadian literature, and I'm not taking this exclusive view of it. So I hear bemoaning of Canadian literature a lot, and like, oh, what's happening to us? I'm like, well, I mean, I think reading in general is spiraling, right? People need, like, our reading comprehension is lower than ever, attention spans are shrinking, and I see reading as this beautiful antidote to all of this. So
Yeah.
I don't believe, the same as with climate change, I don't believe you can get people to make changes by making them scared. I don't believe that anxiety is a very useful motivator. Speaking as someone who lives with anxiety, it doesn't motivate me to do anything. But I do believe that celebrating things and pointing out what we love about things and creating this really enthusiastic vibe of, like, this is for everyone, come here, you're welcome, join us, join us, join us. I think that is, I want to motivate people to join us just because it's a good, wholesome, not, I mean, when I say wholesome, I mean, a lot of the books we read are not wholesome, but it's a really good for you place to be. Like I say, wholesome is not the right word for anything I do, but it's still a fun place to be where everyone's welcome. And you might challenge yourself, you'll probably learn something, and, enjoy your popcorn books, enjoy your books that are, fun and smutty and delicious that way. And then enjoy your more serious reads. Enjoy, like, the ones that provoke you and take you 2 months to finish because they challenge you. Enjoy those ones too. And don't feel shame about any of it. I read my smut, I read fantasy, I read sci-fi, I read personal essays, I read academic nonfiction, I read poetry, I read short stories, I read it all. All of it is amazing. Read it all. Just because you picked up one book of poetry you don't like doesn't mean that you don't like poetry. It means maybe don't read that book. Find something else.
Yeah, that's not for you. There's more.
Yeah, stay curious. Don't say you don't like memoir because you read a bad memoir once. Well, we've all read a bad memoir.
Yeah.
It doesn't make all memoir terrible. I've read wonderful and less than stellar books, to me, other people disagree, from every genre. It doesn't stop me from reading the genre. I just don't read that book again. That's all. So, I mean, I think that's all I'm trying to do is keep energy there and propel people through tapping into our love of story, our love of language, our love of words. I believe we all have it. I think some of us have just lost it. Like, love graphic novels. You don't want to read a book? Pick up pick up Calvin and Hobbes. I don't care what you pick up. Just read something. And that's what we're trying to celebrate, is a community of reading and readership and curiosity. And obviously I'm very passionate about this, but I do believe that if everybody read a little bit more, if everybody dipped more into other perspectives, other places, and into different lives and experiences in our own, I truly believe the world would be such a better place if everyone read just a little bit more.
Everybody read a little bit more, even if it's the smut, bookended with the thought-provoking work.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
I love smut. I love smut. I love smutty reads. I mean, there's space for everything. I love very serious, thoughtful reads too.
Hollay Ghadery, thank you so much. This has been, I mean, we had a few technical hiccups, but we made it. We did it. We did the thing. Thank you so much.
It would not be a conversation with me if there were not hiccups of some sort.
Yeah.
In person, there's hiccups.
Makes for great storytelling.
It does.